Matt with Cultivate Elevate questions everything, and he brings up some points that make you question everything too. And so I've enjoyed just having the what ifs and learn from him and see things, in a little bit different light. So Matt dives in to a lot of things, including Electro-Culture and some of these products like pearl powder or dragon's blood sap as supplements, and I found it absolutely fascinating. Matt, just pumped to be visiting with you again, brother. Love all the content you're putting out. You're killing it on Instagram, buddy. But if you will, just give us that intro to what you do in your own words, and we're going to dive into something that I think is absolutely fascinating.
So Cultivate Elevate was created to provide solutions and not fear. I went back in the day, I used to go into a lot of deep dives into all these dark rabbit holes and all these things. And then I had a lot of health ailments and I couldn't figure out either one. The health ailments they were always telling me it was genetic and I'm getting older, that typical thing. And I realized once I clean up my diet, once I start eating better, once I start taking care of my health and taking care of my body, my health instantaneously reversed. And especially the biggest one was getting rid of GMOs because they're heavily sprayed with pesticides. And there's a great documentary, GMOs Revealed, that's 22 hours long, that goes into all the dangers about GMOs. And when I watched that, changed my life on everything about food, realizing that our food is being used as a weapon against us. And that's why so many people are suffering from health ailments. If it's not the food, it can be the water. If it's not the water, it can be the EMF. And then if it's not that, it could be something that's a toxin in the home, toxins in the terrain. So big on trying to provide solutions to the nonsense that we face, and then also getting us out of the rabbit holes of the fear and the darkness that we're always trying to be put into with all the stuff they broadcast on social media and Operation Mockingbird all the time, trying to say, next is disease X and then probably an alien invasion and whatever else it may be, so big on just kind of showing the other side so that people can remove the fear and move forward with their lives without being in that fearful state.
Love that, Matt. The name that you chose with Cultivate Elevate is something that's really, really interesting and neat to me, because the reason I chose Sowing Prosperity for our mission is kind of that the focus on the positive, because you are spot on with get out of the negative. The war on drugs, it's not working. The war on terror, it's not working. The war on nothing works. And so what I feel is based on, as a Christian, Galatians 6:7, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, this he shall also reap. So how do we get rid of the darkness? Turn on a light. And so I love what you're doing, my friend. And the parallels there are really cool to me. So what I have found is that food does matter a whole lot. Nutrition matters a whole lot, but it's not the only thing. And you go into a lot of that work with frequency and light and things that matter that we don't pay attention to enough, and the agricultural component. So for me, cancer is my number one focus. What is that solution? What's that light to the darkness of cancer? And agriculture is kind of what I've honed in on because I own a farmer's market. I'm connected to the food. And so you have something that's not new. It's very old, actually. As far as something to apply to agriculture, let's go into that, because the electroculture may be the neatest thing that not enough people know about, or maybe even if they do, they're super skeptical.
So electroculture is tapping into the ether, the energy that's all around us. Now remember, ether was removed off the periodic table in 1908. So when you talk about ether and you talk about that topic, it was removed at that time so that it became woo-woo and pseudoscience and quackery. But there's energy that's all around us. You could look at Herman Plauson. He was sending balloons up into the air so that he could gather unlimited energy, because he knew that the higher you go up, the more energy you get. And then you look at Nathan B. Stubblefield. He was the creator of the telephone and also the radio. And he realized that if you put a battery in the earth, it'll get stronger and stronger and stronger, because the earth is constantly pulsing electricity the whole entire time. You can take a voltmeter, put it into the earth, and you can see the voltages coming out. But electroculture is tapping into that. We're tapping into the earth. Taking a piece of wood, wrapping it with copper, placing it into your garden or into the soil, wherever it may be by you, and you're tapping into that beautiful energy that's coming out of the earth. And you're basically harnessing static fields. This is a topic that's not talked too much about, but there's different static fields that are being released. This is why earthquakes happen. You have a big amount of tension coming from the earth, all of a sudden, big pop, and then all of a sudden the earth starts to separate. So when you're tapping into electroculture, you're relieving that static. So think of lightning. People go, oh, my house got struck by lightning. And they used to put those lightning rods up on top. Those lightning rods are to get rid of the static buildup that's building in the on the barn or on the house. They used to put the lightning rods up on top, and they would run a piece of copper down into the ground. What most people don't know is that lightning rod up there is also gathering atmospheric energy like electroculture. And then they would run that piece of copper usually next to a church or a cathedral, and there was a sacred garden next door, and you'd see it be huge and beautiful. They were tapping into this using those antennas on top of the cathedrals and the churches and all of these things. So what we're doing is we're creating these antennas, placing them into our soil so that we can uplift our terrain. And you have to think, like, if I look outside, there's all these power lines. They're gridding your terrain, your home. And that grid lowers the ability for you to produce food. Versus when you're putting these antennas into the earth, now what you're doing is you're uplifting that. You start to see more bees, you start to see more pollinators, you start to see more birds, different animals. I have road runners all over the place, different things. I got horses and whatever. Things come to you because they know that the energy of that area is very healing. And this was all shown, just so people know, this was all shown with Victor Schauberger and many other people. Electroculture dates back to 1835. The US government was performing electroculture in 1910. There's all the documents on it. They were testing it out to try to see what would happen. But Victor Schauberger, during about World War II, presented this with the benefits of copper, using copper gardening tools, copper shovels, copper, everything copper. And what happened was that was all shot down. And the reason being was because the politicians who it was proposed to were getting a kickback from the fertilizer companies. So they shot it down. And they put out a broadcast on the radio and newspaper that if you use copper in your soil, you'll yield too much food and you'll not make enough money. So guess what? Everybody stuck to iron. And when you think of iron and steel and all that stuff that we're using, think of rust. Think of all that rust going into your soil and clumping it up. And then people go, my soil's all messed up, because you're using a tool which is allowing the rust to go in there. And when those blades are hidden, it's creating heat, which makes you have to do what? Use more water. And then now you start to have all this water sitting on top, and it's not going deep into the earth. So then you start to get like mold, and all these issues. And then what do? Pour chemicals on it. And you start to see that none of this makes any sense at all. And when you start to trace back electroculture, where they weren't using pesticides, they weren't using fertilizers, they weren't using chemicals, they were just understanding the atmospheric energy that's all around us, you go, why aren't we doing this? Why are we spraying 4 billion pounds of pesticides, allowing them to go down the Mississippi and just lay into the Gulf of Mexico? They call it Cancer Alley in that area because all the pesticides are going down the river into the Gulf of Mexico. And how can that be sustainable? How can that be sustainable for the planet and for us? And like you just said, when we're trying to figure out what is causing an illness, we're not looking at what we're doing to Mother Earth, and we're supposed to take care of Mother Earth. Like that's what it's providing us with life and keeping us alive, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. But electroculture is a great one to just kind of dabble into. People can start experimenting and having fun. They can use different stones and crystals, which, think of once again, cathedrals and churches, stones and crystals, stained glass windows, color, all these different things that are going on. There's a lot that has a frequency and a resonance in the building. So what you're doing is you're putting it into your garden, just like that.
Matt, why is it important for organisms to have this natural energy? Why is it important for the biological function? How have you been able to wrap your mind around that?
So if you start placing these antennas in your garden, you'll start to notice that your cats and dogs will sit next to them. And a lot of people have noticed that their cats just sit there for hours. They don't move, and then their dogs, same thing. And people are like, oh, they're just sitting in the shade. But they're sitting in these spots. They can pick up on this energy. It's 7.83 hertz. That's what's coming off the earth every single day. The Schumann resonance. We've learned about it where people take their feet off they take they take their shoes off and they put their feet into the earth, and you're tapping into that 7.83 hertz. It heals the body. We are electrical beings, beings of light. We're a giant crystal, all water and everything of light. And so what we're doing is we're tapping into the light or the frequency that's coming off the earth, and that allows us to heal. When we're too much indoors, like too much in this, and we have fake lights and windows that block the UV and everything else, we start to go crazy and we start to have bad health over time. But when we're out in nature, and this is why people who are connected into the soil, spending time with animals, they're always in nature, they heal very quickly. They don't really have the same health ailments because they're spending time in nature and getting those healing frequencies. So all we're trying to do is increase those and bring that back, if that makes sense.
It does. It's been a little challenging to wrap your mind around what we have been told and what we feel like we understand, even though nutrition is a polarizing topic, but that's not even near enough of it. So where I have been fascinated with, Matt, is that when you start connecting all these dots, so you go back to the light. Well, how does our body use the light? And then you go into understanding melanin, right? And then you understand that you trace that back, and it goes back to copper-dependent enzymes. And then you go back further, and you understand that the energy production has a lot to do with hydrogen and the nanomotors inside of the mitochondria. And so, without going crazy too deep into that, utilizing sunlight, like we are these photoreceptors. How have you seen the biggest reception to that? Where are people seeing it click in your experience, with that being a huge topic of what you've been talking about?
So there's a book called Light as Medicine by Jacob Liberman, which goes heavily into this. And think of back in the day, they used to put people in front of blue stained glass windows to heal them. They would do color bathing. And you see this sometimes in the South, actually. You'll see a house, and it just has these random blue stained glass windows in it, just on the side of the house. And you go, why would you just put two blue ones? Well, if you sit in front of the color blue, you begin to heal. And it's interesting, too, because when you get into sunlight, the sunlight is very beneficial. You're getting all the color spectrums. Think of a rainbow. You're getting all the different color spectrums. And when we don't have a balance of color spectrums, like let's say these devices are too much of one spectrum, they're completely imbalanced, or like an LED bulb, completely imbalanced, or fluorescent, whichever it may be. When we don't have that full spectrum, our bodies start to fall apart. And then you start to get headaches and migraines and all kinds of things because the light is so intense. Everything is light, everything that we see. And that's why when you look at nature, you see greens and blues and maybe the beautiful flowers. Everything's very natural. But our screens and the LEDs and all the stuff that we're being sold as sustainable and whatever nonsense, all of that impacts the eyes. And the eyes require 25% of your nutrition for your day. So when people are saying my eyesight is falling apart, number one, they're not getting enough of the full color spectrum. They're not training them, such as doing eye exercises to move them in circles to actually use them. Number three, they're using glasses, which are blocking the UV spectrum. So they're blocking the purple spectrum. So you're not getting the purple anymore. And then they're not nourishing them. And they're like pearl powder and these beautiful superfoods to help nourish the eyes. And then what happens is, as the eyes fall apart, the rest of the body begins to fall apart. And back in the day, they actually used to study the eyes. You would go into a professional and they would look at the eye and they'd be able to determine which organ is not doing well. And then they would say, oh, based on that, your kidney needs this. And based on that, your pancreas needs this. And they started understanding that the eyes are the windows to the soul. We've heard that, quote so many times. So when you think about it, you don't have to cut people open. You don't have to radiate them. You don't have to give them poisonous pills. You just look at the eyes, and you can also look at the teeth. And they're all interconnected, and you can see which meridian pathway is missing nutrients. And this is the olden ways of doing things before we started scanning people and doing all kinds of weird things to them to try to figure it out, and we're still figuring it out today. We haven't figured it out anything, actually, I've realized, but, we're figuring it out still, but light is a very interesting one. And the more you get into it, the more you start to understand that, like, even with like I told you, with the stained glass windows in the cathedrals and everything else, you start to see somebody understood color, because there's so much color involved in the creation of buildings. So we should be using different colors too in our garden, and then also in our home as well.
Matt, how have you been able to rationalize the degree of nutrient degradation? So where, copper's a big one, it is absolutely not in our diet, right? So how is our food so much different right now than it was, say, 100, 200 years ago, or even farther back?
So there's a combinations, when it comes to this situation. You've had a lot of, just testing chemicals and blowing things up on our land, and seeing what that does. And then imagine what that did to the soil, and pouring toxins into the water supply, and then just letting them run down everywhere, and people then spray it. Glyphosate, is a really big one that most people don't know. It completely decimates, the shikimate pathway of the body, and messes with the mind, the gut, everything. And that's a water soluble molecule. So when that gets sprayed, it's going everywhere. They've even shown where it's actually, going into people with doing breastfeeding. It's transferring from the mom to the baby. So this stuff is, running rampant, and it's blocking everything. And glyphosate, the number one thing it blocks is copper. So you start to go, we're blocking minerals from absorbing. And then all the stuff that's going on with our practices of we're growing, bigger and yielding more, but we're decimating the soil. We're getting rid of all the insects. We're getting rid of all the birds, DDT, Agent Orange and all that stuff, 1950s DDT and that whole situation, that messes up the bird population. When you mess up the bird population, you don't have bird sounds anymore to open up the stomata so that the plant can absorb the dew. Every time you wake up, there's that water, the beautiful dew that's on the plants. The birds come out and they absorb that. So when you get rid of the birds, now you messed up part of Mother Nature. Insects, you're spraying all these pesticides. There's no more butterflies, and then caterpillars and all these little ones that are supposed to come around. Bees, you now kind of mess that up. So you screw that up, and then the soil. You're, like I said, you're spraying all these toxins and expecting to be healthy. If I gave you poison and I told you it's poison, how are you going to be healthy? It doesn't make any sense. So same with our soil. If we're bombarding it with 4 billion pounds of unknown chemicals, like half of them, you don't even know what they say. The bottle doesn't even say what's in it. It says other ingredients, and this was an eye-opening one to me. I went to the hardware store and it just says other ingredients on every single bottle. And it's like, well, what's in it? What do you put it in there? And why is there so much iron in it? Why are you putting so much iron into the soil? Almost like that if you put iron into the soil, it messes everything up. But what was interesting was I was doing some research on electroculture from 1926. There was a book that was written in German, and they showed an electroculture and non-electroculture plant, the difference of the minerals. And the plant with the electroculture was 2 to 3 times the minerals of the plant without. And what they noticed was the plant was producing the minerals because they didn't change anything. They didn't change the soil. They didn't do anything. So the plant is doing, if you think about alchemy and how people used to do alchemy back in the day, the plant is transmuting the terrain to create minerals to be a stronger plant. So if you really start to think about things, we can do things that are mind-blowing. And if we take it one step further, there was a fellow who was in Europe, who was in Switzerland. He actually created a box that if you harness static fields, and this is where it gets mind-blowing, and you take like fish eggs of a trout and you place them into this box. So a normal trout is, we'll say like about this big. When he placed them into this box that harnessed the static fields, the fish came out like salmon. So then you start to wonder, well, that's real time. That's within 3 to 6 months. So then the question is what is the true potential of what we can have? Those giant pumpkins and all those things we've seen? You really start to wonder, what is the true potential of what things are supposed to be? And what is making us smaller and smaller and smaller? and more feeble. And we start to think about pesticides in our terrain, a lot of Wi-Fi, a lot of frequencies, a lot of all this artificial stuff, and we're not harnessing beautiful Mother Earth.
Too cool. Yeah, we recently visited with Dr. Stephanie Sneff, who's had a huge focus on glyphosate, and one of the ways she believes is really disrupting outside of the chelation is that it displaces glycine. So it's just completely making proteins where glycine should be not function properly, and that the downstream effects are massive. So I definitely agree with the herbicides, pesticides, glyphosate aspects. As far as what food is today, let's say a banana of today versus a banana 100 years ago, 200 years ago, an apple, or whatever it is, compare that stark contrast between what they used to be when, that wasn't a variable, right? The herbicides and pesticides versus what they are now.
So the mineral content was a lot higher, and the last study done to kind of show this was 1992, where they showed organic foods and they compared them to conventional foods and the difference. And the organic foods had 100 times more minerals than the conventional foods. So when you think now you're going even farther back, let's say 1901, 1902, 1903, you were getting all those minerals. You were getting more than just NPK. That's what most people are getting, NPK. That's it. So you're getting a lot more that you used to get. And that's why people used to say, like, an apple a day keeps, the professional away. Reason being is because those apple seeds had B17 and all these beautiful minerals in them that are very healing for the body. Now what's happened is because we've bombarded our soils and we've stripped everything, now people are suffering from being mineral deficient. And that's why when they start bringing in certain foods and they start healing and start regenerating, all of a sudden they start fixing themselves. But it takes a lot of time because people are very deprived. The minerals that are missing from the body, once one mineral is missing, like you just said, if you're missing one, then pathways begin to shut down. Then once you're missing that, the body starts to pull from somewhere else. It's kind of like a skin issue. When a person's having a skin issue, the body is trying to pull from somewhere else to repair. But if it's not getting the nutrients, it keeps breaking down. And that's the difference. Is you look at the past and you see, just look at the past of what people used to look like too. Everybody had, they had full head of hair. They had the color of their hair till they were, into their 80s or 90s. They also used copper pipes in their home, which was another benefit. But, there was a lot of things when you start to look at this and go, But now, you look at what, 7 out of 10 people have an illness or 2 illnesses. So it's like clearly something has changed and our system is not addressing it. It's progressing to not the way we think it should. First, it should be the other way around. And our food and our soil and our water have a big situation to deal with that.
Matt, would you agree the lack of minerals within the body, the availability of minerals, is one of the maybe fundamental contributors to disease?
I would say so. There was a great book called The World Without Cancer, and it went into talking about the benefits of B17 and B15, which is in the apricot seed. It's also in the cherry seed, and it's in the apple seed. So those are 3 that we're supposed to be getting. How much are we getting that anymore? Well, most people don't know that about the 1950s, they got rid of the bitter apricots, and they also got rid of the bitter almonds. So you start to sit there and go, well, we had the nutrients, but we're banning things. And then as we're missing those nutrients now, the body starts to fall apart. And then now you add in radio frequencies from cell towers and cell phones and all of this as well, which allows toxins to pass the blood-brain barrier. And then you have, let's say, water that's, as we talked about, filled with maybe some toxins. Now all of a sudden you have the plethora of these issues going on in the body. And then they introduce a bunch of these and put them into the people, which we know what that is, into your arm and everything else. About, 75 of those before the age of 18. Those have toxins in them too. So you start to sit there and go, we're poisoning our body. And we're doing it deliberately. Like that's what it is. And if we don't clean up everything, we see the trajectory. So it's like we have to take a stance. And that's why, when I got into electroculture and I started talking about this topic and it kind of went crazy, I realized there's a lot of people growing their own food and they're doing it the correct way. They just don't talk about it. And there's a lot of healthy people too, which aren't talked about. We focus on the one side, but there's a lot of healthy people too who are growing their own food and doing it the right way. And we have to move more into that. If we stick over here, we're just going to have all these health issues and then not figure out what it is, which is the root cause of we're just poisoning our body and our terrain. Once we clean up our body and we clean up our terrain, everything heals like that. And it's beautiful, and that's what I realized, because I've seen that. I've seen people go from this side, the poisonous side, to the healthy side, and it's just a drastic change.
So, with the electroculture, I'm still super fascinated. Looking forward to diving in more to that and getting the B-roll type stuff you talked about sending earlier. With the minerals, one way that you have found to kind of implement that is through Shilajit. What can you explain that? Why the different forms matter? Why a product like that is a way of getting these vital nutrients, minerals in our bodies?
Of course. So Shilajit or Shilajit, however you want to say it, there's a million different pronunciations, but it provides the body with 84 of 100 minerals. So, you're providing the body with the minerals that we are missing. And what it is it's soil, and it's like a tar that has compressed through mountains for thousands of years. And what happens is when we take that in, they come in little tablet forms. When we take that in, we start to provide those minerals back to the body. It's also high in fulvic acid, which is great for detoxing and pulling things out of the body, and also humic acid, which is what is also great for pulling things out of the body. But the benefits of Shilajit is that you're bringing these minerals back, and it comes from the Altai region in Siberia. That's actually where we source. So we have a farmer. He goes out to the mountain. He collects everything. I know everything about it. He collects it, brings it in. They put it through distilled water, make sure it's all clean, and then we have it in a tablet form. And the reason we have it in a tablet form is because it's the easiest to travel with. It's the easiest to pop and go. You can take it with a meal. You can take it wherever you go. We used to have a liquid, but the Shilajit would try to escape, and it was just messy and all the time like doing its own thing. So we went with the tablet form. Now there are other forms you'll see sometimes in like a tar or whatever it may be, but sometimes those go through a lot of processing, and that processing will zap a lot of the nutrients out of it. So we are very big on its cold pressed, not messed with. We keep it in its perfect state and want it that way, because sometimes, as you know, with vitamins and minerals and superfoods, things are heavily processed. They put fillers and maltodextrin and citric acid and all these different things in there, and those things will work against the body because you're trying to get the main ingredient, but then you have all these unwanted things. So with everything that we come out with, it's always just the pure form, and that's it. It's one ingredient, Shilajit. That's it. So when you take it, you can take 1 to 2 tablets. You take it with a source of fat, so you get those fat soluble vitamins. But what you're doing is you're bringing back those minerals, and it starts to help with energy, helps with chronic fatigue, helps a little bit with pain, helps with brain fog, and the thing is too, is since it helps detox and pull things out, it can be very helpful if you have your gut lining is all blocked up, because that's what a lot of people sometimes, as we were talking about, are suffering from. All this processed stuff that they're eating is sitting in their gut lining. And because it's sitting in their gut lining, their brain is not working because it's trying to digest all this energy for digestion all the time, trying to cleanse that through. And then people can be bloated and it can work against them. So Shilajit can help actually come in there and kind of cleanse things out and pull it all out so that the body can go back into balance.
It's really a fascinating thing. With the Shilajit versus, say, the humic and fulvic complexes, where have you seen that contrast come to play? Because like the liquids, I have seen those work miraculously, and so trying to compare and get a better idea on what's the difference between the two is really important. And one thing that I have found is the humic complexes, the humic acid, really help bind up the glyphosate to kind of tie all that back in there. So what's that difference in your experience?
So just the difference is you have more full spectrum with the Shilajit itself. Sometimes with the fulvics and the humic acids, you're only getting a partial spectrum, because depending on what it comes from, usually they make it, I think, from like peat moss, so then it depends on if you're getting the full amount, and that's sometimes the issue with a single something, vitamin D, vitamin C. It's in a single form, and the body doesn't always work well in a single form. But if it has helped for pulling glyphosate, that's amazing. I'm happy to hear that with the humic acid. But with Shilajit, when you get into it, you're doing the full spectrum. You're getting all the minerals and everything and how it works together as in nature. Versus sometimes with the humics and the Fvix, it can be more of a single spectrum. And people can combine them, but for the most part, I've seen most people just take the Shilajit and they're like, I don't really take the Fvix anymore. And it's just because it's easier. And then also, like if you said, if it's in a liquid, it's impossible to travel with. Like you got liquid spilling all over, and then they're like, oh, you can't take that on the plane and whatever nonsense, that they tell you. So, with the tablets, it's pop and go and nice and easy.
Really cool. Something else that you've done that it was way out there for me. It was the first time I've ever even heard about it, is pearl powder. So what is that, and why are you so passionate about getting that out there?
So it's actually pearls. So, if you think of a clam, it's from a pearl. I'm sorry, if you think of a clam, that's the pearls that are in the clam. And that's what a person is consuming. And when you go back into, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, they've used pearls for 5,000 years. They use them because pearls are actually very healing for the body. And when people used to replace a tooth, they actually used to put a pearl in place because it's the exact same DNA as a tooth. So when you think of all those plastic polymers and synthetic things they try to put in your mouth, they used to use pearls because they would fit right in and it would work. That was where pearly whites came from. But the whole pearl situation is a very fascinating one because it gives the body nutrients in a carbonated form. And this is where we're going into the most purest form. You have magnesium carbonate, you have selenium carbonate, you have calcium carbonate, you have all these beautiful aminos. And the most fascinating thing, and this is kind of what got me into pearl about a year ago, was there was a lady who did a study where people had cataracts and she had 100 patients and she started giving them pearl powder. And within, it was about 60 days, or I'm sorry, about 100 days, I believe. Within 60 of her 100 patients, all the cataracts were reversed. And I thought, okay, well, when I learned about eyesight and I went to my eye professional, they always just told me I got to get thicker and thicker glasses. It never made any sense that I could feed my eyes. And then when I started understanding the benefits of pearl and how the pearl has 2% structured water and goes in there and helps to feed the eyes, then I started thinking, oh my gosh, it's like carrots. You think of carrots, they always say like it's got it looks like the eyeball. So same thing, you're feeding the eyes with certain foods. And so as we've gotten into it, I've had some remarkable stories of people not using their glasses anymore, not having to see, use their reading glasses and things like that, going to the eye professional, their prescription is reversing. And the professionals like, I've never seen this before. And, we've been documenting that, but just magical things. And then when it comes also to like too much stimulation, because that's what we kind of all suffer from, too much, pearl can help relax the central nervous system. It's really great for restless leg syndrome that, a lot of people are kind of suffering from because you have the beautiful magnesium in there from a carbonated form. But when you get into it, if you think about it, as we're just kind of talking about, you have Shilajit, which is the land minerals, and then you have pearl, which is the water minerals or the ocean or the sea or whichever one you want to call it. So what I try to do is incorporate all these different elements of the earth to help heal the body because that's what we're made up of, earth. So when you start bringing in pearl powder, you can throw it in your smoothies, you can throw it in your coffee, you can put it in oatmeal, or you can even put it on the skin topically. You can take things like castor oil or coconut oil, jojoba oil, rub it on the skin. It starts to heal the connective tissue. But it's one of the most mind-blowing supplements I got into. And I was in the fitness world for a long time. I studied a lot of different things. But when I got into pearl, I was like, this is just crazy, and it just isn't talked about. And I always wondered, well, why? And then I thought, well, the eye business is a very large business, so if we are competing against something, it wouldn't make sense that something would be out there, but everybody else eats it. So why shouldn't we? And that's why we rolled out pearl.
So, Matt, what is a pearl? What is it made out of outside of the few minerals that you mentioned? And what mechanism do we think that is having that effect? And is there any effect on bones? Because that would almost seem like a game changer for, say, osteoporosis.
So with it, it's if you think about it, it's technically in the shellfish family, but it's a clam. So you technically are eating like shellfish. So if you kind of think of all the minerals you would get from shellfish and clams and oysters, all these specific, I think it's mullux. I can't ever say that word, but yeah, that it's all in that family, so you're getting all those beautiful minerals, but it's pretty much just, when you look at a pearl, it's pretty much just it's a lot of calcium carbonate, and then you also have a lot of magnesium, you have a lot of selenium, and then you have a whole plethora of trace minerals, which are what are healing the body. And a lot of those trace minerals help increase glutathione production, which is what we're kind of always suffering from, the liver not functioning properly. And the biggest thing that I've noticed with pearl is that it helps to feed the spleen pathway. And that's one that we really don't talk about what we're feeding. And it's just interesting because when I started getting into it, I started going, that's a pathway which is connected to the eyes, connected to the liver, connected to your digestion, and then also, like you just said, connected to your bones. If we don't feed the body the right minerals, the bones start falling apart. And with all the fluoride that we have in our water system, and people start developing fluoridosis, pearl can come in and come in there and help provide the body with minerals so that the bones can stay strong. And what a lot of people have noticed when they start using pearl is that their hair grows faster, their nails grow faster, their skin looks better. But the nails and the hair are definitely connective tissues, also connected to the bones. So it covers all of the parts that you don't really focus on, kind of like when people used to use horsetail, if you remember that. They used to use horsetail a lot. So same thing in that. You're providing almost like the silica for the body, which is just, all part of every piece of the body. So if you don't have that piece, every part just kind of starts becoming brittle and kind of falling apart.
Have you had anybody using it with kids? Either one, Shilajit or the pearl powder? Is that something that is considered a safe use for kids?
Yes, and the only thing I would say is just make sure they don't have a shellfish allergy with the pearl. But yes, pearl is, the studies go back a long period of time, but very, very safe for children. Also safe for dogs and cats. A lot of people give pearl to their dogs and cats for their hair and their eyes. But, Shilajit and pearl can be very beneficial. Whenever a child is taking anything, you want to just make sure you start off really small, just because they're little tiny people. So maybe you'll give them a quarter of a teaspoon of pearl powder, or maybe you'll give them a half of a tablet, of Shilajit. But yes, it's very safe. And kids, you have to think about this. They're absorbing things like a sponge, and they're burning through things very quickly. So they need minerals too. So instead of a Flintstone vitamin, which is filled with a lot of
Mm,
artificial things and synthetic
yeah.
things that your body can't absorb, you're better off going with something from nature or something that's food based so that the body can heal.
Absolutely. Yeah, you brought up the spleen, and I don't know if you know Morley Robbins or not, but it was actually been going back a little bit with him, and he brought up this melanin connection with the spleen, and it was really cool, and I didn't understand what he was saying until I was like re-reviewing that. But this melanin connection, I said all that to say I think the spleen is way, way, way more important than anybody gives it credit for. But the melanin aspect of it is we only think of melanin really in the skin and it gives us a tan, right? Or it gives us some eye color or this or that. But it does so much more. And it being located where it is and functions how it does as photoreceptor is fascinating for me. But to tie this into the supplement thing, it's my understanding that like chaga is going to be like the highest melanin supplement that we could potentially take. And now I don't fully know if that would be a supplemental thing that we could do to help put melanin inside cells or not. I have no idea, but it's just interesting to think about that. Is that something that you know anything about with a supplemental oral melanin?
So pearl is actually on the lowest of melanin. So that's what's funny. So
Yeah.
chaga is the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So it's the flip flop. And think of the color. Chaga is very brown and black, very dark. Rich in the melanin, like you said. And then pearl powder is almost completely white. So it goes back into the color spectrum if you think about it again. Eating like the rainbow or eating certain colors to help feed the body. Or I always talk about like feeding the eyes, depending on whatever your eye color is. You should feed that color because that's what's portraying through your body. But yeah, pearl is on the lowest spectrum. So it's interesting when you get into all this, that kind of becomes an anomaly of melanin and then the spleen, because then it's kind of the opposite. So that's what I've started to realize. There's so many things where things don't make any sense, but they work on certain pathways and then go, okay, maybe they complement each other. Maybe chaga and Pro Power complement each other very well then, because you have the opposites, or like yin and yang and how everything works. So, and Morley Robbins is phenomenal in his work. I always talk about him and everything with copper and all the books he's wrote and everything, and give him a ton of credit for everything that he's done. But it's just, something to kind of think about on the other side.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you I don't know how familiar you are with like Jack Cruz, but he brings in some really interesting ideas that again I have not been able to wrap my mind around all this, but it's so fascinating to me that there's these different points that seem like they're interconnected, and I think honestly we just don't understand near as much as we even think we do. Uh, One more thing, Matt, and I want to understand the dragon's blood, but Dr. Laszlo Boris is phenomenal, and he has been a pioneer in the deuterium aspect. And so, breaking down deuterium versus hydrogen in the nanomotors and energy production, and I think that that's another one of these things that may be one of the most fundamental problems that we have as a deuterium overload. But I said that to say the production of energy is not necessarily clean, right? It produces a lot of, radical oxygen species, all of these needs of having antioxidants. So where have you been able to kind of tie that around? Because you seem to have a pretty cool, supplement as far as the opposite of that in the antioxidants and dragon's blood.
So, that's what I was going to say. With the dragon's blood, you're at 3 million antioxidants, going into healing the body. And, dragon's blood is tree sap. Like, think of turpentine, back when they used to use turpentine all the time. And then think of maple syrup, those beautiful minerals that come from maple syrup as well. But yeah, dragon's blood is just a remarkable one. When I learned about this, I was kind of blown away that it had a 3 million ORAC value on the antioxidant scale. And then you get into, for example, like chaga mushroom is 50,000. And I used to think chaga was up there. And then I was like, this is mind blowing for dragon's blood. And then blueberries are like 10,000. So I was like, wow, that's not even coming close now. But yeah, when I got into learning about this, I was like, okay, when it comes to repair, if we have all this oxidation and all this damage that's being created, we need something that can help repair. And dragon's blood actually used to be used as if a person had a wound, they would take some dragon's blood, place it onto the skin, and it would begin to heal that like a band-aid. And this is what they used to do back in South America. Anytime a person was cut, they would cut the dragon's blood tree or the Draco tree, place a little dragon's blood on there, and the wound would heal like that. And it was interesting because as we rolled out dragon's blood, we had a lot of people who had UC, which is one of the issues with their gut lining. And then we had a lot of people with skin issues where their hands were completely chapped and all horribly. It looked, I felt so bad. And after about 31 days of using dragon's blood, completely fixed and the hand completely healed. And the people who messaged me were like, I've had this for 10 years. I've tried lotions and ointments, and they'd give me all these creams and put stuff all over me and pull skin from me. And dragon's blood healed it. And it made me start to realize, look at how fast we can regenerate. If we introduce, like you said, if we don't understand how things work and we don't bring something new in or understand how things work, we can't repair because we don't know what we're missing. And then if we don't know how things are connected, just like you said, how do we fix things? If you don't know that, you have too much iron in your body and you need more copper and things like this, well, then you're going to keep taking iron supplements, but not understand that the iron supplements probably messing you up. So you start to get into this. So dragon's blood is just this remarkable tree sap. And when I got into it, it just kind of came like, I was like, if this is as beautiful as it says it is, this is going to work wonders for people, because skin issues are always very challenging because they're stemming a lot in the gut. And then also, it can be used topically, and you can rub it onto the skin topically. And you'll just start to notice that, your skin will feel very silky, after using it. But we have it in capsule form, and you can just pop a couple capsules and, take it in that form. But when you get into repair, we need certain things to help us repair. That's the other issue we're talking about here, is that we don't have enough repairing going on. We have a lot of breaking down. We're breaking down stuff every day and everything else, but we're not repairing on this side. And dragon's blood can come in there and help repair, clean out the gut, clean out the blood, and then help to heal the skin and keep it at its fullest.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating. You've definitely brought in things that a lot of I've not heard of. And so, but as you dive into it, you have a lot of support behind what you're saying. It's, I don't think that you're the crazy guy on the internet that's just making things up. Like you have like a lot to back up what you're saying. What I would love to see happen is that we are able to source all our food locally from these biodynamic farms, and we don't need any supplements whatsoever. But that's just simply not the world in which we live in. And so, like, the need for some of these things, I feel like are critically important. And I disagree with some of the others out there that are saying you have to get everything from your food, because I just don't think it's possible in this toxic world. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think you're 100% correct. I think it's challenging to get everything. I mean, how about this? There was a study done by Dr. John Ott, and he did a study on food underneath fluorescent bulbs. And think of the grocery store, it's all fluorescent bulbs. Now it's LEDs, which are just as bad. But, you have fluorescent bulbs, and he noticed that when like milk, like raw milk, was placed in front of fluorescent bulbs, the mineral content went down after about 3 days by like 75%. So just being placed in the wrong light is diminishing the mineral content. And think about when you go out in the sun, you're getting full spectrum, so you get beautiful, like you said, local. If everything's local and it's at a farmer's market, it's directly towards you or to you. Like we go to a little small spot and it's directly towards me, and I pick it up and everything. It's not transporting farther. You're getting it right away. You're getting it before it's now starting to break down. So, and that's the thing that we have to start thinking about. Okay, I'm missing this, I'm missing that. How can I help address that? Now, you don't have to take things indefinitely for the rest of your life, but you can kind of figure out, okay, this is what I think is going to work for me. This is what works best now. And then maybe in the future, this is what you use then. But, when I was in the fitness world and that whole situation, I saw a lot of crazy things happen with just beautiful bringing in superfoods and watching people do crazy feats of strength. And then same thing with Cultivate Elevate, understanding how the body can heal naturally. And it really just showed me that clearly something is missing, because we've addressed a lot of the sides of the diet and the organic and filtering the water, and people are still suffering from issues. So you sit there and wonder, well, what is missing? And it could be just a trace mineral, like something so simple that's missing in the body. And as you start to address that, you're like, wow, that's all I needed this whole time. I just needed like a little bit of this. And that's what I think is the most beautiful part of everything in learning, and all this education and things like that. It's like just putting things together and going, that makes sense. Too much rust in the body doesn't make a lot of sense. Just little things. And as we start to correct those, the body can heal very fast. But if we remain in that same state and we think that we can, get everything from one thing, I don't know, it moves into ego. It's kind of like this is 100%. And I've learned to you just drop that and just kind of have an open mind. And that's kind of what this whole podcast was about today. Just have an open mind to see different ways and see it in a different light in which we've been told.
I love it, my friend. So, what's next for you? Where can we send people to learn more about what you're doing?
So they can find us on cultivateelevate.com. I have a blog on there that's connected to YouTube and Rumble. And then we also have a Telegram channel that's on there as well, where people can come in and chat. It's grown to 60,000 people about. So it's been nuts watching it grow. And I've been really big on that because I get censored on every other platform that I talk on. So I thought, well, Telegram it is. You guys want to block me on Instagram. So I went over there. So, you can find the information on there. I put all the videos and links and things like that. But next, what I'm working on is an ElectroCulture book. It's been in the works for a long time. I'm going to show all the before and afters and different results that people have had with ElectroCulture, and then tie some of the stuff we talked into today into that book as well. And then I'm working on a couple different products, a new mushroom, which is a very rare mushroom. And then I've been working on a couple different things with copper, and then some stuff with the eyes. That's what I'm kind of working on next. Different things related to eye colors and healing with color. And then moving into some just a couple different things related to salts. So a lot of different stuff that I'm going to be moving into this year. But this year is a lot of innovation and like different things than kind of last time we talked. But just kind of just trying to figure out how can I address this situation and help provide a solution. Because when I was in this, this pickle at like, 25 or whatever it was, every time I talk to somebody, they'd be like, "Oh, you're just getting older," and it's like
No.
doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. So people have to start realizing that the people in which we're talking to, they haven't been taught much about nutrition. They only get 4 hours of nutrition in 10 years, and that we have to start to work on healing ourselves. We have to take that initiative. And my whole thing is realizing that we have to do it. I can't expect somebody else to do it for me. I have to do it. And I think that that's the whole thing of 2024 is everybody realizing we're giving away our power to somebody else to try to heal us. We need to heal ourselves. That's how it works. And then when we heal ourselves, we can help heal others. And that's the mission of Cultivate Elevate.
Boom. Beautiful, my friend. I love your passion, your curiosity, and, even more you execute and you get stuff done. So, thank you, my friend. And, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us on Sowing Prosperity. Be sure to follow along across the social media platforms, including YouTube, and be sure to go to sowingprosperity.com.